introduce ourselves.
Yeah.
And then
So, Andrew Schumacher, and
my name's Brock.
we're going to be doing media reviews of movies and other texts that we find intriguing. Gonna put that out as content. And you can follow us at the doobly-doo. I'm pointing down, but I don't necessarily know what's down there yet. The framework
We
hasn't
haven't
been
figured
built
that part out
for it.
yet.
Yeah, we're doing this in an agile way.
Yes.
Kalishnikov. Speaking of Kalishnikov, World War II. We watched Overlord. My alternative title is Ubermensch for it. When we started watching it, I was like, oh, why is it that they're starting Project Overlord at like the go phase? Because right off the bat, it's just like adrenaline, conflict, adrenaline, your friends are murdered, your family's murdered, your dog's getting skinned live in front of you.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, no, it's a movie set right before I believe it's D-Day, right before the actual landing of D-Day and stuff, and they're trying to bring down the radio towers in Germany so that the United States can send in their ships and planes without being detected. And essentially, when they're flying in there, shenanigans ensue. Throughout the course of the movie, and then right from the get-go, you kind of get an idea that it feels like it's an actual World War II movie right off the bat. And
it being set in World War II. Oh,
right, yeah, exactly.
Really threw you for a loop on that one.
Right, yeah. It feels like a World War II movie right off the bat, but then as things progress and it picks up the pace a little bit more, things are not so much as they seem.
Yeah.
And you start to get more of a usually, I guess, when they get into the town and
So spoilers.
spoilers.
By the way,
From at this point, this is not a non-spoiler review. This is a spoiler review.
you should still see this movie.
Yes,
It's good.
right.
We're touring it. You know, I'm not your mom or dad.
We should start off actually, since we're already doing spoilers. We should say that this is a pretty fucking good movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is just so you don't like go off the context of like us babbling at first. It's a good movie and you should see it. So don't worry about that. We're gonna get into spoilers now to kind of discuss the movie more at length, because there's a lot of stuff that if we tell you, it's gonna ruin a lot of other stuff. So we're just gonna do that right now.
It's very much like From Dusk Till Dawn, the Quentin Tarantino film.
Yes.
You go into this movie in this like conflict-oriented path, and you never have time to question it, because much like a lot of other contemporary movies, they take you from one immediate concern to the next, just kind of like dragging you along with explosions all around you.
They don't give you a lot of time to think about what's going on. The movie just happens as it happens, and you're forced to kind of go along with it, and that's good, because that's less time for you to question what's actually happening. You're just there for the ride for that moment.
And it is a pretty up until the like From Dusk Till Dawn plot twist, it very much is a direct movie. The good guys are good guys, the bad guys are bad guys. It's Americans versus Nazis, and the main Nazi villain, right as soon as you meet him, it's like, oh, he's a sexual predator. All right, so I understand who is the bad guy, and I understand that the good guys are the good guys.
Very clear lines are drawn.
Yeah.
Right off the bat.
You got yourself being a Nazi, you got yourself being a sexual predator, and you got yourself being a necromancer.
Yeah.
What? What?
That last bit we'll talk about in a little bit here. In and of itself, the characters are not super deep characters. They're more or less your standard cliche World War II soldier characters. You got your loudmouth, seems like Brooklyn or something like
Italian Brooklyn dude.
Italian Brooklyn, loud gum chewing asshole character. Yeah. Then you got your protagonist, which is a stoic, quiet, contemplative character with what did you say earlier was internal conflict.
Yeah, he's internally conflicted with using violence as a means of resolving situations.
Yeah.
Which is amusing given the current political climate.
And the nature of the situation that he's in the movie to begin with.
Yeah, it makes sense. Good guys are good guys, bad guys are bad guys.
There's not a lot of room to have internal conflict in a situation like that, especially when you're in the middle of war.
Yeah, and the character development they have for him remains pretty much just like a story about him not wanting to kill a mouse, and then his troop getting punished for it, transitioning to him murdering, it's war. Him effectively killing terrible people. And people that are, throughout the movie, very much demonstrated as kind of this, like, nihilistic cancer that takes humanity and perverts it so then that way they can maintain this power that they have over themselves and their mortality and society.
Oh, that really does reflect our current political climate, doesn't it now?
I mean, it's a pretty transhumanist movie. But the type of transhumanism they're talking about is more of like the, occult, necromantic, satanic style of, we become liches through embracing this otherworldly force. Yeah.
It's almost like they don't want you to pick up on that.
Yeah. They cue you in to these themes in a very subtle way. The movie seems normal, although at the very beginning they kind of why is it that the radar tower is on top of a church? And the answer is because Nazis are godless heathens.
Yeah.
Which is not the case, because the papacy at that point in time actually had assisted in, aided and abetted Nazis escaping the Nuremberg trials. So, we're not overlooking that one, Catholicism. However, these Nazis are godless heathens, and it very much that cues you into the horror supernatural elements in hindsight. You get into the village. The village is of French citizens. There's a degree of resistance, but the majority of them are complacent to
they're just letting the Nazis kind of run wild as opposed to actually being, in battling with them, because it's, less desirable to die than it is to try and resist an invading force. So there's a scene in the movie where they're trying to, the main female protagonist, Chloe, I think it was, is trying to sneak the other soldiers into her home, and when she's doing that, an older lady opens up the window and she's like, "What are you doing out here? You're gonna get us all in trouble. I'm gonna have to blow the whistle on you." And she literally blows a whistle, and the Nazis come and they grab her, and Chloe's character previously was running around looting shit or something like that, and she got back into town and they grabbed her bag and they were looking through it and so on and stuff like that. That's kind of the theme of the movie, and I think that it really contributes to that theme, because a lot of the movie is shot in a way that's really claustrophobic, close quarters. Everything is just right in your face to kind of ratchet up the sense of intensity for each scene. And like you said, there's really no point in the movie where you have a lot of room to breathe.
Yeah,
it's very much like everything is happening, quick. And you're just there. It's a ride. It's essentially a ride. You don't get a whole lot of time to think. There's not a lot of downtime to actually contemplate what's going on. You're getting taken at light speed through this movie. But that's kind of what makes it really good, because it's an adrenaline rush the whole time. You're going from, like you said, one scene to the next scene that's always super intense. From interrogating the Nazis, to going to the bunker for the first time and then trying to escape the bunker, and then they're invading the bunker, and then there's a shootout here, there's a shootout there. There's really not a low tension scene in this movie, but that's kind of what makes it great.
And in all of the environments that aren't explicitly violent, there is always the implicit threat of violence. It's a movie that has jump scares. It's not really the jump scares are executed effectively and to a degree where it's not cheesy, but it still has a degree of humor. The kid has a jump scare when he's holding a gun, they turn a corner and he's there. Even in the domestic, that being inside the French girl's house, everything has that degree of tension that's imbued through the film. There's distrust amongst the characters, despite being in a very high pressure environment. It kind of has one of those like Deep Blue moments where, Samuel L. Jackson, he's not in this movie, but where, someone's like giving a speech and then all of a sudden they fucking get annihilated. In this case, it was a landmine and like a conversation about someone becoming an author.
Yeah, exactly. And it was kind of funny because like, it almost veiled itself as a character building scene as like, oh, they're telling me more about this character, so they're gonna really, make this guy a part of the story, and then they like a second later they blow his ass up. So like, and in talking about the jump scares, it's never the same. There's a couple of scenes where it's the same thing that's giving you a jump scare, but it's not always the same thing, which I think is using jump scares correctly. Because in ghost movies and a lot of scary movies these days, you almost come to expect the jump scare to be from a certain thing at a certain time. You can usually pick up cues from the music and stuff like that. But in this movie, there's multiple things giving you jump scares. From the kid to the monsters to the Nazis to even a lab scene later on in the movie, so you're able to actually be startled by this scene because it's not something that you accurately predicted was going to happen.
There's a beautiful moment in the theater between us in which the aunt of the French girl that is helping hide these GIs, the aunt is very sick, and that's kind of like this like supernatural secret that the French girl kind of keeps away from the main character.
Yeah.
You get this moment where, you have this beautiful, like, long, protracted shot where the main character's walking up to the door where the aunt's in. He, like, slowly opens up the door and, turns back because the girl's there. And he turns back and sees the old woman right in the crack.
In the doorway.
And you just see this, like, rotting flesh as if, like, the skin had either started falling off and peeling off this very like plated section of facial ridges, very part reptilian, part rotting corpse.
It was very clear that she was more than just sick. She was not just sick at all, you know. And that's another thing I liked about that scene in the sense that she was able to. They actually lingered on her face long enough for you to kind of get an idea of what was going on. Whereas in a lot of jump scare scenes, it's just kind of there and then it's gone.
Yeah.
So you don't get a lot of time to even understand what you were looking at, and there's no fear involved in that.
And my response to that was, man, what do you find out, or what do you bet that, like, in the next couple of scenes, we're going to find that this is a spiritual successor of the Human Centipede?
The Human Centipede.
And we were, to some degree, correct.
Yeah, in a sense, with the actual experimentation, German scientist experimenting on people, and there were quite a few scenes in this movie that actually made me pretty happy because they were something I hadn't seen in movies in a long time. Just original things. Like there's a scene in the movie where the main character is going through the lab and he's seeing all these strange things, pods with people who are being experimented on in him, and then he hears this French lady whispering. I can't remember for the life of me what she was whispering, and I didn't know what to expect. I expected maybe just like some corpse laying on gurney or some dumb shit like that, but it ended up being just a fucking head and neck spinal column talking. And it's just like, that's rad because...
Yeah, what's French for kill me now, please kill me now?
Right, exactly.
It kind of was something like that.
Yeah.
And like from that scene going forward, it very much like dialed in to the, as we were talking before, like the satanic transhumanism that is kind of imbued into the nihilistic philosophy of the Nazis. Mm-hmm. Like... a people that, during the last half of World War II, the extermination of the Jews actually increased its pace while they were losing the war.
Right.
They were actively putting in soldiers and resources into the extermination of human life rather than the preservation of their authoritarian genocidal society.
Just the absolute lack of humanity and almost the more motivation to actually kill the specific people that they were bent on killing in the first place instead of saving their own hides, which is disturbing on a completely different level, but it definitely slips that theme into this movie because of the lengths that they're going to with like the things they're doing to these people even after they're dead. And that's like a thing in and of itself, like the disrespect of the dead and the lack of care of people that are dead, and just trying to make them into other Nazis even after they're dead. That reeks of that type of point of view.
So they're pretty much, the French citizens are being used as like guinea pigs in order to dial in this chemical serum that will infuse their soldiers with unearthly vitality and life. Yeah. And there's like a line which is like, the 1,000-year Reich needs 1,000-year soldiers, which is a cool line. I love that.
That was a good line. Yeah, that was a really good line. And it's just the idea that they're not even concerned so much with like the preservation of who their Nazi soldiers are as people. It's just the idea of making them last longer and work more towards their goal. Yeah. And the fact that it doesn't even matter at all, like who people, who they are as people. It's just, we're gonna turn them into these nasty, disgusting, morphed superhuman monsters,
It very much is a continuation of like Nietzsche's observations of what happens after the death of God. Right. When rationalism is embraced, humanity all of a sudden recognizes that there's no form of objective value that exists inside the human life. Right. And so they then like have this really utilitarian approach towards dominance and control. Yes. To the degree where like human life is a tool for dominating other human lives and not valuable in itself for any reason.
More used as like humans are more valuable to be used in a machine in the same way a machine is used than an actual way that a human could be used. But, and aside from all that, like, I think, as far as the acting goes in this movie, acting was as good as it, really needed to be for most of the characters. I wasn't like, oh, that guy sucks. Or, you had mentioned one of the lines that the main antagonist, one of the Nazi leaders says, and it was a really corny line.
How does it feel to have the serum of unending or like eternal power,
blood or something, flowing through your veins or something like that? What was it? No, it was
it's like, it doesn't feel that good, and it's just like, come on, now it's time to say like hasta luego and blow
just run with this because it's already corny, right? Yeah. No, and it was, the thing was, and if we haven't mentioned it already, the whole thing was basically they get into this town, and as they explore this town and find out more of the secrets, it turns out that there's this Nazi lab mad scientist guy who's injecting all these dead people, Nazis, French people, what have you, with a serum that turns them into an experimental serum that hasn't been, it hasn't been refined yet, so they're turning into these unstable zombie-esque monsters, or they're driven mad. Yeah,
which is pretty surprising that like these monsters are docile enough in order to be dragged out on like trucks and then flamethrowered and removed, but like when the characters are assaulting the place, they open up a door and then one of them just starts. Well, I mean, it doesn't really kill that many Nazis, but like it does kill one of the individuals that's threatening the female protagonist.
And I know, and the monsters themselves were, I thought they weren't bad in the sense that they were, they weren't original. I don't think that it was that original, but they served their purpose really well, and they didn't, and part of the reason why I like this film is they didn't take over the movie. They didn't take over, the actual plot of the film. The monsters were there to be monsters, and they were as a threat, but they weren't they didn't become the center point of the actual movie, which is good because that's not what the movie is about.
The mission is about sticking to the mission and blowing up this command tower.
Precisely.
And the way that is like this overarching theme of like, what is it that a soldier does at war? They get the job done at a sheer disregard to their own lives in order to carry out the orders and, what is good according to their
point of view. Yeah. Well, from the moral standpoint, what is appropriate. Yeah.
And there's no real vagueness about this movie. Did I mention that they're necromancers?
Yeah.
And sexual predators? Like, come on.
There's definitely no gray area. Nobody's really having, and once that becomes more revealed, and like once that becomes, holy shit, this is what they're actually doing. Nobody in this movie is having any conflictions with killing them. They immediately, they're dead on sight and stuff, which is great. And I guess that, if I can extend onto that, is that it's a very focused film. There's no sidetracking hardly ever. You're on a track on this roller coaster, and you're going the direction that it's going to take you, and there's no sidetracking to any other subplots. And I believe that serves this movie really well because it's an action thriller movie. Yeah. And anything else would just distract from what you're there for, which is fucking Nazi heads blowing up and explosions and crazy monsters.
Bad guys getting killed. Yeah, there was no Finn and love interest going to planet for no particular reason and then proceeding to have like a 15-minute scene that just doesn't need to be there in the first place.
Didn't amount to anything at all.
Yeah.
It actually may have made the character, the situation in the actual story worse than it should have been. We're not going to talk about Star Wars.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about that. That's a whole different story.
It's a much longer video than this.
And other people have done that, so we're just going to stop that there.
Yeah.
Practical effects. They do a mix of practical effects and a mix of CG effects.
Yeah.
It seems like they use CG in order to be able to do like larger set environments. They did a lot of intriguing practical effects for the undead monsters. They inject, or when like the main characters really see what it does for the first time, they inject the dead body of one of their comrades, and he gets up and he's like, wow, I'm perfectly fine. And then his head snaps back, and then all of a sudden you see like his sternum and like shoulder blades popping out his
spinal
throat.
columns coming out of his throat, his neck, and his head's all the way back, and then it just whips back forward, and you can see like little bone fragments sticking out of his shoulders and stuff like that, and out of his back,
and there's like this degree of like puff to him that kind of like demonstrates that they had a series of like practical effects things applied to him. Which I think came out really well. There's a couple times when, there's like one of them who has like a stump arm that like is impaling stuff with like his bone. Like his arm is just cut off and it's like rotten to there. And he's just like stabbing stuff with his stub. Maybe that was CG. It wasn't in the shot for very long. But kudos to it, because I think that they created really dynamic monsters and very, very believable as undead creatures. And it wasn't like all of a sudden it was a zombie movie.
Right.
It's still, they had the speed of you said 28 Days Later? Right?
It was like more of an infected, superhuman monster movie, I would say, in the sense that, and I love that as far as like, because not to diss zombies or anything like that, but we're getting to the point right now where we're so oversaturated with the same kind of limping, groaning zombies, Walking Dead, brain zombies, that it feels.
Where's my check, brain?
Right, exactly, and they're not
phoning this one in.
Exactly, and they don't even, and it doesn't take any effort to kill them seemingly nowadays. Like if you watch The Walking Dead, you'll know that they get wasted in like every 4 seconds, so they don't even seem like a viable threat. Whereas in this movie and in like 28 Days Later, and I guess you could reference Resident Evil to a certain extent in terms of like the speed and quickness and the superhuman ability,
and the way that they transfer over is kind of like Resident Evil.
Yes, and that's great, because that makes it feel like it's an actual threat. Like you need to get the fuck out of here. Like you can't just linger here.
And they don't explain the serum.
Thank God. Fucking God. If there's anything that doesn't... We don't need that. That doesn't need to be explained. It's a superhuman serum. You inject people with it, and they go crazy. Like that's all I need. I'm not a scientist. I don't need you to throw a whole bunch of exposition in for this super secret bright red orange serum that seemingly makes people come alive. Like,
I'm also not trying to find out how to do this in real life.
Right, yeah.
So, I'm
not,
Although I am German, but...
Let's take away the fact that these are Nazis doing this in the first place. This is something you shouldn't do just as, from a general moral standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because it like comes out in a series of... It comes out with a bunch of other movies that talk about transhumanism or talk about like modifying the human form in order to facilitate some utility. Like, you know, you have... Ghost in the Shell. It's like main character is to some degree an undead technologic creature that
android.
Yeah, she's kind of like a golem in the sense that her memory and what she does is entirely built around the technology that has facilitated her. Similar to these monsters, they have this biological or chemical agent that is imbuing through technology this enhanced vitality, superhuman abilities, or in the sense of like strength and endurance.
Roid raging.
Roid rage, pretty much.
Pretty much roid rage, just with, you know, the added effects that you're going to have, like some of your skeleton maybe pop out of your head.
Yeah.
Or something like that. But yeah, no, and the only other thing that if I ever had a complaint about this movie is that there are some scenes where it seems like they're about to set up for something, but then that doesn't ultimately happen at all. Like originally, what was the... what's the main character's name now?
Just refer to him as Private. He's a great actor, by the way.
Great actor.
Great actor.
Great actor. Great at emotional responses.
Oh, yeah.
It's a fantastic job.
Yeah. Beautiful eye work and beautiful eyebrows and just like that face. Like throughout the entire, like the beginning of the movie is really just everything is shot from his perspective.
Yeah.
And everything... is either a shot from his perspective or it's a shot on his perspective and his internalization of the outwards events.
Yes.
The conflict is very much demonstrated on his face, and like that guy needs to get an award for the amount of like
the fact that
minute communication.
Yeah, the fact that he was able to kind of convey his own emotional response to what was going on when the scene called for almost absolutely no talking or no noise. Like when there's a scene in the attic where, like you said, the aforementioned Nazi pedophile molester guy is trying to...
Pedophile? Where'd that come in? I mean, I knew he's a bad guy, but...
I don't know. I'm going to assume most Nazis are pedophiles. Why not?
They are.
Seems apt. But no, just there's a scene where he's about to force himself on the female protagonist character, and they have to be absolutely quiet. The corporal, leader, tough guy, blonde-haired dude, and our protagonist, Private, are up in the attic, and they have to be absolutely silent so not to expose themselves as being present in this house as, like, you know, what would you say, stowaways, I guess.
Yeah, well.
And the proverbial Anne Franks, and
yep.
So they're being quiet, and the whole time there's, you know, terrible shit happening to this lady, and he is, you know, also, but maybe that's more to his character. The corporal doesn't display a whole lot of emotion, but he's supposed to. He kind of knows, like he says, his mission is to not...
I mean...
elicit.
He's not allowing his emotions and his connections to the things around him to stop him from getting the thing done.
Right.
Which that and chaos management are the two key drivers of what we view as masculine in society.
Yeah, exactly.
Utility and chaos management.
Right. Not to respond to otherwise offensive situations. But the Private character does a fantastic job of, you know, grimacing and, you know, furrowing his brow and creating a scenario where you can really feel like he doesn't want this to continue happening, that he wants to get down there and make sure that this stops, but he's not saying a thing. Mm-hmm. He's not making hardly any noise, but you can tell that this is something that he is absolutely not okay with, and he wants to get down there and make it stop. Also, great camera work with filming through the cracks of the floor and, like, being able to clearly see what's going on. You know, I don't know how one would film that. But.
Well, I mean, they did an interesting combination of, like, gimbal, kind of like Ronin shots, where it's on a stabilizer as they're walking through, getting really smooth shots. And then there's some other parts that they have it, like, handheld. And then there are a couple, like, dolly kind of, like, drone shots that raise up.
Yeah.
They kind of intermittently use those while also, like, having... when the main character is jumping out of the airplane, they have the camera actually like attached onto his vest and then looking back at him. Mm-hmm. And so there's just this really disorienting shot of him just like flipping through the air. And you just see like explosions.
He's trying to release his parachute. Yeah. He's just like, that was a fantastic, and it's not something I don't think I've seen that in a movie before, or at least not in recent memory, and I thought that was great at ratcheting up the tension, It was like, because I was like, he's still falling, he's still falling, and he's not ejected his parachute.
Pulls the parachute, and then like 3 seconds later, he slams his feet right through the water.
Yeah,
yeah.
Which was a great scene in of itself, because if the camera followed him all the way down into the water and to the floor of the actual water where he was, and before he cuts his ties and he surfaces. Another great scene into the parachute. Not right out into the water, which is something that you more or less would come to expect. He's going to surface right out of the water, take a deep breath, but he fucking...
They have a lot of surreal and eerie, like, abstract shots that are kind of art house.
Yeah.
Like, like for that shot you just described, it's pretty much a solid shot throughout the entire way and back up. I mean, there are probably a couple cuts that are really well done.
Really subtle cuts, yeah.
But the way that it's brought to the viewer is like this fluid stream of events of just... conflict, disorientation, conflict, suffering, conflict, disorientation, conflict, change to the next scene, and then as we move to the next scene, there's going to be a long shot in order to disperse some of the tension, and then no matter where we go, we're just going to include conflict in a couple other areas, even if it's like slightly out of what you would expect in the environment, like the kid.
Yes, exactly. And see, that was and it's not something that you really get to think about when you're actually watching the movie. You're watching the movie and it seems like everything's calmed down to like just a regular pace for a while, and then all of a sudden, here's the kid around the corner out of nowhere. It doesn't give you a moment to breathe. There's really no like dull moment in this movie. Every shot is just tense. The opening scene, I will admit, I'm starting to wonder the more I think about it. I think that maybe, this scene in and of itself wasn't done on a major budget, because when we start the movie, we're going in with the planes flying, and you have to admit the CGI wasn't really that great when the planes were flying into the clouds. Like it wasn't as good as it could have been.
Well, I mean, like we're all jaded because we have like multi-million dollar budgets.
It's
for,
very
like,
true.
Like
we're spoiled brats.
Yeah, if you want to see something like that, watch a Marvel movie.
Right.
But if you want to see continuous conflict and action being applied in a movie that makes sense, watch this movie. Otherwise go see the next, regurgitation of the same archetypal tropes, characters, and, just watch another Marvel movie. I mean, they're entertaining. This movie was entertaining too, but I think that it had a lot more substance than your average blockbuster.
Just as a movie in general, it had, like, every little bit of it had something going for it. And and on the note of like, even if they couldn't afford the CGI that much, it was really nice that they knew that. And so they didn't blast us with really bad CGI the whole damn movie, which is nice. It's nice to know that when you maybe you can't afford the best CGI, the Marvel CGI, the Star Wars CGI, that you don't try to pump that into a movie and make...
Hence the amount of shots that they had for close-ups to people's reactions.
Exactly.
Like, when you want to make a film on the DIY budget, like you involve the emotions of your characters.
Right.
You keep the drama to the tension that exists in between relationships.
Yes.
And then that way you don't have to like have things be at like an epic scale.
Right.
You have a degree of suspense, you have people distrusting each other, you have a hostage crisis, you have a hostage getting out. And
like you said, building to the tension of the actual story, which is what's important here. It's what's happening right now. It's not where they are, it's not why they're there. It's just what's happening right now. And that's why the way the camera was used in this movie was fantastic, because every scene felt super claustrophobic and like closed off. So, and it builds tension with the viewer.
The only time that they build tension in kind of like a disingenuous way, kind of like where in a blockbuster they'll have action happen, but not necessarily for a reason.
Action for the sake of action.
Yeah. In this movie, there were like a couple moments that kind of felt like that.
Yeah.
There was one of the jump scares that happened with the kid, and then there was the main character running out of the bunker while it was exploding. Mm-hmm. The bunker / church. And it was just like, oh, come on. Like, I've seen, like, 4 doors explode, and the wall is crumbling behind him. Mm-hmm. Every time he takes a turn, he gets hit by, like, another gout of steam. It's just like, Yeah, I get it. The thing's exploding. The
Right,
thing's
yeah.
crumbling.
There's no
right?
the timing, so to speak, is what kind of takes you out of that moment because as he passes each corridor, it blows up, and it's just like that's not what happens. Like either it blows up or it doesn't blow up in sequences. Especially as you watch the movie, you kind of see them set the charges for whatever's about to blow up. So it even makes less sense that it's blowing up one at a time. Because if they set all the charges in the same area in the basement, one would think that would blow up all at once, same as the tower.
Depending on whether that serum is flammable.
That could very well be. But again, one of the things that, they don't go to explain, which is fine. I'm okay with that.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Please, don't make a sequel and don't explain that. Or if you're going to make a sequel, make it about, like, Russians that like are in the winter front in Russia, and it's like Stalingrad, but like they're dying and then they're getting resurrected, and they're like zombie Russians fighting zombie Nazis. Like you can make that. And I'll give you my money. Like
make it a like you said earlier, a spiritual sequel. Don't make it a direct sequel, please, because like. If there's anything that we suffer from nowadays, it's unnecessary sequels, unnecessary remakes, unnecessary reboots. This movie stands alone on its own because it's an original movie. It has nothing before it that it's referencing. It has nothing that we know of that's going to come after it that's going to make it seem less important. In and of itself, it is its own film, and that's what makes it so good because it's hard to compare it to anything else. You can't compare it to a sequel. You can't compare it to another movie that's like it because
From Dusk Till Dawn is the closest movie that I could compare it to.
And even then, that's more of just like how the movie carries itself.
Yeah,
it's not the actual
the
movie.
The plot sequencing functions like that.
And like you were saying, in a world where all we see is like where it's just independent, heartfelt movies and Marvel movies and Star Wars movies and Star Trek movies and just money makers. It's nice to see movies that don't feel like they're being made just to kind of pass the buck. Like they're being made because somebody took this idea and they thought it was a genuinely good idea.
Yeah.
And that's how this movie came about. I've heard multiple people say that if Star Wars was made nowadays, it wouldn't get past a certain stage because it's an original idea. And the way Hollywood works now is not off original ideas. It's off stuff that's guaranteeing cash. Comics are established. Star Wars is established. Things like that.
Speaking of sequels they don't need to make, you hear that they're remaking Shrek 1?
Yeah. I don't even.
No, we don't need to go. I just wanted to mention it. We don't need to talk about it. I'm really glad they have a Jewish character inside this movie. I'm really glad that they mentioned they had him inside the very first scene. He disappears. He's being experimented on. Is the next time you see him, he manages to get out with the help of the main character.
Yeah.
Personally, I would have just let him there. I'm maybe just a coward in those areas. And then he ends up living until the end of the movie.
He doesn't die.
He doesn't die.
Yeah.
He doesn't die.
In fact, a lot of the people that do end up dying in this movie, with the exception of, the main corporal guy, are non-factor characters, really.
Oh yeah, I mean, they keep the characters to a very tight-knit unit.
Yeah, and honestly, I expected the loudmouth guy to die.
No.
I thought he was gonna die. I was like, usually the loudmouth guy is the guy that
he's the Joker.
He's the Joker, and he has some sort of moral, or some sort of moral epiphany later on. Maybe I shouldn't be such a douche, and then that's when he dies. And in a sense, that is kind of what happened. He was just like, I'm gonna take care of the kid.
Yeah, and despite the kid being the source of all conflict, as any parent knows, that's a true statement.
Yeah.
But
no,
it's just trouble. He gets kidnapped by the Nazi dude and used as a human shield. He warns the Nazis that they're inside the attic by dropping a baseball. He runs out into the middle of a street during an active firefight.
Right.
And then the Italian smart guy, I'm walking here, steps out there, grabs him, runs back, and these Nazis, these stormtroopers, have such bad aim that they hit him once as he's getting to cover. And it's just you ran out of cover right in front of him.
Right.
Like, I get it, you're a movie.
Right.
Like, this is really the only part that, like, I personally had my disbelief, kind of like, oh, he has plot armor. I get it. The kid, they need to protect innocence in the threat of horror and tyranny. They need to protect the innocent youth and the innocent woman who, well, I mean, to be fair, she's kind of a badass.
She is a badass in this movie.
Yeah.
She actually takes the lead in a lot of scenarios that, you know, that are not the best ideas, but she's definitely...
She's inspired. Like,
she's
it's
inspired.
Her family.
It's her family. She wants to save her little brother. But
yeah, her mom and dad got killed, probably experimented on. Her aunt, she's still... The girl's still taking care of her aunt. Her aunt's pretty much like a zombie, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know how close we all are to our family, but if anyone around me was a zombie, I'd plug them.
If they look like that... That you're not sick anymore, Aunt. You are something else now.
Yeah, sick is definitely a euphemism on that one.
Right, you are sick. Yeah, you're sick in the way that's going to get violent. And that was funny. Like, I thought that was funny because the scene where they introduced the aunt, where she's in the secret bedroom and she's wheezing. It's not like a sick wheeze. It's not like a wheeze. It's like a wheeze, and it's just like, that person's not sick. How can you guys just sit here and like look like, oh, this is a sick aunt, whatever.
Sick.
Right.
Sick.
Please kill my aunt. Sick.
Yeah, I think my takeaway is that Nazi occultism is something that is relevant to our current climate. Mm-hmm. The involvement of transhumanist technologies is also relevant towards our continuing trajectory, and I just think that, like, this space that this movie, like, snuck itself into without us knowing coming into it, I think that space is rich, is like a media content goldmine.
Right.
And I think that we don't need to tell ourselves stories about multi-dimensional combats between gods.
Yeah.
We can very well dial it back to the demons and angels that exist inside our history,
right,
and expand upon that using our contemporary understanding of science and the occult,
right,
in order to tell very unique stories.
And this was a fantastic well that they went down for this material, because, like, there's so much that you can actually, you know, delve into in terms of Hitler being somebody who was into the occult and very superstitious, and there being actual historical documentations of the types of things that they were trying to do, is something that, like I stated to you, is Hellboy. Hellboy was the only other type of movie that really touched on that.
Yeah.
And it's such an interesting, like, idea, and it amazes me that, and I said that this kind of played out like a video game, because there's video games out there that have delved into this type of stuff already.
Yeah, it's like a Wolfenstein movie, but you don't know you're into it until you're into it.
Right, but it's so great that this is finally getting into film, because not only is it something that can, you know, hopefully they don't exploit it to the point where it's just burned out, but, you know, it's nice to see a movie that has this, like, almost extraterrestrial / supernatural element to it, but it's not, you know, it doesn't oversaturate itself. There's still so much that you think about at the end of this movie that you want to, like, look into, and it makes you want to look into it.
Yeah, like the U.S. government after World War II bring over Nazi scientists and rocket engineers through Operation Paperclip in order to take the elite subject matter experts that were working for the Fuhrer in order to gas Jews and kill everybody.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know.
Or just you know, you could even twist this into, like, something that what was that? When the U.S. admitted to experimenting on soldiers during the Vietnam War.
Oh yeah.
What the hell was that called? God. Anyway, that experimentation, the drugging of, like, soldiers and stuff, and even if it didn't play out exactly in that way, you know, more movies about this type of, our government is, you know, secretly experimenting on people to increase the possibility that we would have super soldiers or mechs or something like that. That's an amazing subject matter that could easily be, you know, translated into the endless different types of movies. And this is definitely a movie you gotta see. This is a good movie. It's something that definitely breaks from the norm, which is something that I feel like nowadays with the way that movies are, with the ones that with the biggest marketing teams seem to get attention. This is something that's refreshing.
It certainly is. Well,
that's our first review.
Yeah, Brock and I thank you very much for your time.
Yes.
Thank you for viewing this. If you got to the end of this through our rambling, we appreciate you.
Yep.
I love you. Maybe you love me. Maybe you love Brock. Give us a like. Share this thing. Talk about us. Hit us up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Share.
Subscribe.
Smash that like button.
Smash that. Hit the bell.
Notifications.
Maybe something's over there. Maybe we've got a link.
Maybe we've already got another
faces.
video at some point here. Who knows?
Yeah. And cue the end.